from the 37th parallel on America's haunted highway, it's Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange.
Oh, it's my turn. All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Pixelated Paranormal. This is episode 321. I, of course, am Sean, and I'm happy to announce at the top of the episode that my wife is officially finished and passed nursing school. So I'm incredibly proud of her and just want to make that announcement. It's been a long, hard 2 years for her, but she triumphed in the end. And I also think I got a rib out of place. And with me, as always, is Preston. Preston, tell the kids at home a little bit about yourself. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Hey, we got good news all around, pal. Good news all around. Hey, we got good news all around, pal. Good news. Hey, your audio's not coming through. Your audio's not coming through the old YouTube, pal.
Oh, look at that. I'm an amateur and I forgot to unmute my mic. But you know what? For all those people listening on iTunes and Spotify, you'll get to hear that intro.
Yeah. For those of you that missed that, Preston has to have a CPAP machine now. He is old balls.
Old balls. I'm like the old guy on what's Big Daddy, you know, like the 5-year plan. I'm that dude.
You're that guy. Fair, man. Fair. Well, this episode should be fun, and just like last time, apparently there are some thunderstorms inbound, but I think we might have it beat by about an hour, so we're not going to waste any time with the news. We're just going to get into the good stuff. So how about we talk about some weird alien encounters, shall we? They say the best things come in twos, so we thought that an alien contact double creature feature sounded mighty nice. So first up tonight, we're going to share the puzzling tale of the Fanged Humanoids of Kōfu, a dazzling tale about two young boys and their brush with the unknown in Japan. And then we're going to head over and talk about the story of the Kinnula Humanoid, featuring two lumberjacks and their encounter with a strange entity out in the backwoods of Finland. So grab up your main squeeze, get the popcorn ready, and buckle up, folks. Let's get into it, shall we?
We shall.
Tonight's first story takes place in Kōfu, Japan, located between the city of Nagoya and Tokyo. And it just so happens to be the capital of the Yamanashi Prefecture. And before I go any farther, guys, heads up, we'll be mispronouncing tons of geographical locations. But anyway, back in 1975, this beautiful and idealistic part of Japan served as the backdrop for a truly terrifying tale, where two second-grade boys had a face-to-face encounter with a pair of diminutive, metallic fanged humanoids that descended upon them from a flying saucer.
Holy fuck, dude. This is the prequel to Go Power Rangers. This is where these kids grew up and fucking wrote that shit.
Yeah, dude. It's funny. Hold on to that, and I'm going to touch on that just a skosh at the end here. Anyway, sometime before 7 p.m. on the evening of February 23rd, 1975, two 7-year-old boys, Masamoto Kawano and Katsuhiro Yamahata, we're out roller skating in the... Jeez, here we go. Off to the races. Hinode Housing Estate in Kamimachi, Kōfu City, where the two boys...
Kamimachi, Kodo.
That's offensive.
You got to really...
I do not.
You pronounce it, you really got to get into it, you know? You gotta
not
like,
with that accent.
you gotta really get angry with it, like you're yelling it, like
Mhm.
oh, and then you're gonna nail it,
That's
dude.
that's a generalization, and I think it's incredibly, incredibly wrong and offensive.
Oh,
Anyway, the two young boys were out roller skating, and they both happened to notice something glimmering up in the blue sky. And after watching it for a little longer, as the glittering object got closer, they noticed that the anomaly they were looking at was actually a pair of glittering orange UFOs frolicking together across the sky above. And of course, this completely enthralled the two young boys, and the pair just stood there, staring up in awe, as the larger of the two objects suddenly broke off and flew in the other direction towards Mount Otago, while the smaller craft slowly descended onto the ground, landing amongst the props in a vineyard behind the estate. Now, what's weird here is that the objects both seem to be emitting an odd crackling or ticking sound, kind of like both crafts were making the noise of a Geiger counter. Anyway, just like you or I or anybody else with a healthy curiosity might do, the curious couple of youngsters wasted no time at all. They removed their roller skates and took off on foot to get a better look at whatever the object had been that landed back in the vineyard. As the two second graders approached the previously sparkling orange spacecraft, they now saw what had landed was actually a domed, silverish saucer that stood about 7 feet high and was around 15 feet in diameter. They said this classically shaped flying saucer was standing on top a 3 ball-tipped tripod set of legs. So 3 tripods with little balls at the end. And what the children described were strange characters embossed on the metallic surface of its hull. And these hieroglyphs or symbols were nothing that the two had ever seen before. And then suddenly, while the boys were inspecting the craft, both Kawanu and Yamahata were both caught off guard. And a bit frightened, no doubt, to see a hatch open on the side of the craft and a ladder slowly, automatically extending down to the ground below their direction. The boys were gobstruck and stood in silence as the bizarre humanoid creature began to disembark from the ship. The two boys reported they both saw a weird-looking creature that had abnormally long arms and stood about 4 feet tall. And it was wearing a shiny silver uniform that seemed to almost be glowing or reflecting the sunlight. But here's where things get a little weirder. Where the space that the entity's skin was visible, both boys described it as being dark brown and covered in wrinkles, so dense in fact they could not see any noticeable features except for 3 terrifying 2-inch long metallic-looking fangs coming from where the thing's mouth might have been. The boys also claimed that it had a large set of pointed ears and seemed to be carrying a long weapon-like object they both said resembled a rifle. And as the boys watched the strange creature making its way down the ramp, they noticed another, smaller but similar-looking humanoid was sitting inside in what would appear to be the craft's control room.
And then from their belt, they pulled out their power coin and yelled, Triceratops, Tyrannosaur! Go Power Rangers!
Now, the silvery fangs are a new twist, but the wrinkly skin might ring a bell for a lot of us here, similar to that of the Pascagoula alien abductions. Of course, those things were said to have almost like rhinoceros or elephant-like skin on them. And if you guys are wanting to know more about that, we covered that episode several years back. But it was also featured on a new documentary show on Netflix talking about the unusual and the unknown. And they do a pretty good job of retelling that story and interviewing the surviving people and family of those two guys.
It's another episode where you got onto me for my interpretation of somebody's voice, and then come to find out that's what those motherfuckers really sounded like. So,
yeah, you know what? You can't always be wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway, apparently the unexplainable entity began to explore the grounds it had landed upon, and it seemed nearly oblivious to the underage duo that were standing there slack-jawed staring at it. That was, however, until it abruptly wandered over to the boys and suddenly placed one of its hands on Yamahata's shoulder, where it then softly patted him twice and then uttered a series of unfamiliar noises that sounded similar to what the boy said was a tape recorder running backward.
Baka baka, baka 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 baka, baka 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 baka.
Yeah, kind of like that if you kind of, close your eyes. And again, just like most of us, after making a close encounter of the third kind, Yamahata collapsed on the ground paralyzed and unmoving. But for anyone familiar with the so-called close encounter of the third kind can attest, normally human beings in this situation are oftentimes seem to be put in a state of almost suspended animation by the extraterrestrial visitors. What one must assume could be an effort from them hurting themselves or somebody else nearby. But just as soon as Yamahata dropped down to the ground, motionless, Kawano sprung some really big balls of steel and then sprung into action, rapidly pulling his friend up and onto his shoulders, and then lugged him away from these weird-ass vampire aliens just as swiftly as he could. Yamahata soon regained his faculties, and the two boys hauled ass back home, and immediately the two hysterical young boys recanted their close encounter to both of their mothers. And again, just like any other pair of doubting yet cynically curious mothers would, both of the boys' moms followed their sons, who were both having an obvious prepubescent mental breakdown, and went back to the Hinode housing estate, where much to their shock and surprise, both mothers and both boys ended up seeing an unexplainable, pulsating orange light lazily raising up out of the vineyard. This odd light show continued on for about 5 minutes, just hovering above the vineyard. Before the boys could convince their mothers to investigate the strange craft at a closer range, however, the UFO landed with a burst of light so brilliant the eyewitnesses were compelled to avert their eyes. And here's what's kind of interesting too. It appears that Yamahata and Kawano weren't the only ones to have actually seen the aliens, because apparently another one of their classmates, an 8-year-old boy named Ichiro Minagishi, also reported that he saw a shining object flying towards the direction of the Hinode housing estate while he was riding in the car with both his parents near the Kōfu bypass. This was about approximately 1.5 hours before the boys claimed to have discovered the UFO. Anyway, the following day, Kawano and Yamahata had a captivated audience of students at their school and faculty as well. And soon, they began drawing pictures and retelling the harrowing tales of their alien encounter. Preston, if you haven't already, throw that first photo up there.
Yeah, gotcha.
Sweet. And it wasn't long before the buzz spread through the entire school, and suddenly the entire group of educational authorities decided that they would have to inspect the area for themselves. So the school officials arrived at the scene, armed with whatever gear they could get a hold of, and immediately noticed that 2 large solid concrete pillars had somehow been pushed over near the same location where the boys said the saucer had landed. And then, to their credit, the authorities determined that the boys would not have been able to accomplish a task of knocking over these 2 posts on their own, making this intergalactic vandalism more and more likely. The investigative team found that what they referred to as landing traces were on the grounds where the boys said the craft had landed, as well as a ring pattern in the soil near the broken concrete post where the craft had landed. One school teacher even claimed to have had discovered radioactivity within the circle patch. Now, following the event, both boys were questioned in depth by their parents, their schoolmaster, and they all noted that even a UFO investigator, Marasaru Mori, even came in, and their stories remained alarmingly consistent. Not surprisingly, though, the authorities of the Civil Aviation Bureau of Transportation Ministry had claimed the UFO was nothing more than the lights of a YS-2 propeller plane, which oftentimes flew at an altitude of 1,000 meters and was visible to the naked eye. They apparently reserved comment as to, however, if this thing was being piloted by some small pointy-eared fanged humanoid. But what's interesting here, Preston, is some naysayers go on to say that they believe the two boys were making something up similar to what they might have seen on an old episode of Ultraman, very similar to Power Rangers. Yeah. Because you got to think, that's going to be in your pop culture. A lot of men fighting giant rubber monsters, but who knows? Well, our second story is that of the Kinnula Humanoid. We're going to go back about 4 years to February 2nd, 1971, at approximately 8 p.m., where two Finnish women, Sanika Kuitinen and a lady named only as Miss Manninen, were driving from Kusumo towards Ulua in a region near Kieminki, where they said during their drive they spied a strange light behind their car on the right side of the road. After a few moments, the mysterious light slipped over the vehicle and began to keep pace with the car on the left side of the road. Now, Kuitinen, who was driving the vehicle, claimed that as the UFO passed overhead, both of her ears began to mysteriously plug up. When the pair arrived at a nearby field, the light abruptly then disappeared. This is when Kuitinen and Manninen both claimed to have caught a glimpse of the unbelievable. The women later insisted that they had seen a peculiar helmeted creature that stood approximately 3 feet tall. They both agreed that this enigmatic entity was clad in a greenish-brown suit and crossed the road in front of them by utilizing a series of small jumps similar to anti-gravity, like you can see an astronaut jumping on the moon. This odd being swiftly disappeared on the far side of the road, which the women confirmed was a desolate area without any buildings or houses. Now, Kuitinen, whose fear far outweighed her curiosity, hit the gas and sped directly the fuck out of the city of Ulua. Neither woman seemed to be interested in investigating the matter any further, and so they just chalked it up to being something unexplainable. But lucky for us, as fascinating as this incident was, this would not be the last nor the most frightening encounter that human beings would have with this enigmatic entity. Now fast forward 3 days later to the snowy, overcast afternoon of February 5th, 1971. At around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. On this day, two lumberjacks, 21-year-old Peter Alaranta and 18-year-old Esko Juhani Snek, had spent most of the morning cutting down trees in the forest near the village of Kangasakaila in Kinnula, Finland. They both decided to call it a day because the overcast conditions were making it harder to see. Now, Arilanta had just turned off his chainsaw when he suddenly noticed an odd metallic object hovering right around tree level. This thing, he said, was the shape of two saucers on top of each other and was about 15 feet in diameter. At the bottom of the vehicle were 4 thin landing legs with rounded bases, which he estimated to be more than about 6 feet long. Now, he couldn't tell if the craft itself made any noise due to the roaring of his partner Snek's chainsaw, but Arilanta continued to watch as a peculiar portal then opened at the bottom slowly from the base of the descending ship. Within moments, the object landed in a small clearing between the trees, less than 50 feet away from the awestruck lumberjack and his oblivious comrade. I like to imagine that, Preston. We're out there together sawing logs, and you're looking over there just seeing the spacecraft coming down, and I'm just over there just minding my own business, listening to my earphones, and just cutting more shit up with a chainsaw.
And bam! Alien.
Flash, bam, alakazam. Arilanta stared in amazement as a weird, green-garbed entity slowly began walking through the open portal from the bottom of the craft. He later described the unearthly entity as being about 3 feet in height, with its entire body covered in a green one-piece suit. On the front of the head was a faceplate that was described as being akin to that of a scuba diver. Now, Presto, if you could, throw up the other image there for me, if you haven't already, number 3.
Of the scuba diver.
Yeah. So
There you
what
go.
I'm imagining here, if anybody is a fan of the Twilight Zone, let's see here, January 27th, 1961, there was an episode that aired called The Invaders. And this was about an old lady who lived out in the middle of nowhere in a farming house. And she is suddenly besieged by these two little alien creatures. And they're wearing big bubble suits and, little visors, almost like big pudgy scuba divers. And so that's what this creature kind of reminds me of. And that actual episode would have aired probably 14 years before this encounter. So again, pop culture could have somehow influenced this, but who knows? Although the creature had arms and legs, the suit gave no indication of hands or fingers. The apparent structure of the suit seems to be akin to the deep-sea diving suits divers would wear to protect them from pressures found in the oceans, and especially in the most severe depths. Perhaps this alien was wearing something similar for the pressure of Earth's surface, which may be harmful to the creature itself. While this is pure speculation, there is still the possibility that it's true. This bizarre spaceman seemed to defy gravity as it floated down the 6-foot-long ramp into the snow-covered ground below. It was then, much to Alaranta's alarm, the creature began to approach him. Now, much to the lumberjack's surprise, the being did not sink in the snow, but continued toward him with short, stiff, gliding movements akin to that of an astronaut skipping across the moon. Alaranta described the motion as almost robotic, but perhaps the movement was just inhibited by the suit that it was wearing. Anyway, at that moment, Alaranta, who was understandably terrified, started up his chainsaw. A la Ashley Williams, right?
Yes, Ashy Slashy.
Snack, who was so focused on cutting branches off of a fallen tree, had not noticed the anomalous craft or the scuba diving suit-cladded occupant, turned at the roar of the chainsaw beside him and saw the shocked expression on his friend's face, as well as the tiny, 3-foot-tall alien oddity that was galloping toward them both. The lumberjack, with what must have been accredited to the jolt of youthful bravery, advanced upon the humanoid as Sneck watched dumbfounded. Alaranta and the encroaching alien were less than 30 feet apart when suddenly the entity abruptly stopped and started back towards the saucer with the same lopping gait. This retreat further emboldened Alaranta to now run in pursuit of the little green man. When he got closer to the UFO, though, Alaranta claimed to have noticed other vaguely humanoid figures through 3 windows on the top side of the vehicle. When the alien was about 10 feet away from the craft, it levitated into the air in an odd fashion, floating towards the opening from where it came. And just as the humanoid had descended and was about 3 feet away, Alaranta lunged and grabbed a hold of the heel of the being's right foot. He said he grabbed it with his bare right hand and suddenly was overcome with the flash of pain as the material of the creature's suit burned like a hot iron. The wounds caused by the contact with the boot were, according to all reports, still clearly visible 2 months later. Alaranta instinctively leapt backwards, allowing the entity to glide back into the ship unscathed. The moment the alien disappeared into the saucer, the craft itself began to emit a soft buzzing sound. Then it slowly started to ascend off the ground with what Alaranta described as a weak gust of air, but no smoke or other scents were evident. As the saucer rose skywards, the circular portal at the bottom closed within about 15 seconds, and then the UFO disappeared into the atmosphere. Following the craft's departure, both Alaranta and Sneck claimed that they were unable to talk and had difficulty moving for nearly an hour following the harrowing event. The only evidence that remained of their bizarre encounter was the rounded prints the saucer had left in the snow. And in the years following this event, some had suggested it was a hoax perpetrated by a local radio DJ who put the lumberjacks up to a ruse. But there are others who insist this is a genuine close encounter with an alien creature. What do you think, Presto?
I'm like Fox Mulder. I want to believe. I want to believe.
Me too. Me too, buddy. Me too. Hell yeah. Well, I highly suggest if anybody has not watched it.
Captain Scott said we are lagging. He's also on watching us. He said the lagging stopped, and Yuppie Gorgato from Kickstarter commented on me having a CPAP and said, I'm now Darth Vader.
Oh, nice. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Guess.
Look at you, man. You're really coming up in the world.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys are Twilight Zone fans like me, I suggest you check out episode 15 of season 2. Check out The Invaders. It's one of my absolute favorite episodes, and I even have a little bobblehead that I got. And to take things one step further, I plan to actually get a Invaders tattoo one of these days soon.
What? Look at you.
Yeah, I think so, man. I think so. Well, if you guys are on the social medias, please check us out over at PXL Paranormal on Instagram. We are also the Pixelated Paranormal Podcast over on Facebook. Preston, talk to me a little bit about where we're streaming, buddy boy.
Ooh, we are streaming on Kick. We're streaming on Rumble. We're streaming on YouTube. And apparently we are now streaming on Facebook. We are up to 24 followers on Rumble. We're still sitting at 311 on YouTube. So look, if you're watching us on the social media, do us a favor. Like, subscribe, and share with all your friends so we can grow that viewership and listenership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And need a beard? Want a beard? Want to grow the best damn beard possible? Well, we have got a deal for you. Introducing Big Dob's Beard Balm 2.0 because beard butter is better. Picture this. Power Rangers, those mighty warriors, fighting aliens in the heart of Japan. Just like them, you can conquer any challenge, including taming your unruly facial hair. Big Dob's Beard Balm 2.0 is your secret weapon in battle for the beard perfection. With our specially crafted formula, your beard will be stronger, shinier, and more heroic than ever before. Say goodbyes to the days of scruffy stubble and hello to the days of epic facial hair. And here's the best part. Use promo code PXLPARA and get a whopping 20% off your order. That's right, save some serious cash while you save the world from those lackluster beards. So don't wait any longer. Join the ranks of the Beardtastic and unleash your inner Power Ranger. Get your hands on Big Dob's Beard Balm 2.0 today and watch your beard transform into a force to be reckoned with. Or, if you're like the Yellow Ranger or the Pink Ranger, put some Dobbs and have a heroic bush. You know what? You can conquer evil any way you want. Get it all. Get it at Dobbs. That's what I wanted to say.
Nice. I appreciate it, man. If you're in the Wichita area, stop by, see Leslie and the rest of the gang, CD Trade Post, Pawnee, and Seneca, and also check out the Paranormal.cafe and Paranormal Egg Experience. Now, I just thought about this, Presto. With my vacation schedule coming up, we're going to be going to the Caribbean here in a couple weeks. I don't know if I'm going to be home for technically our 9-year anniversary, so we may have to push that back a little bit to celebrate it the right way, because I also forgot to put out the APB for, listener stories as well. So, folks, yeah, I know. I know. Well, you forgot to. If you guys are listening, watching, what have you, if you're listening and watching and what have you, please shoot us over some of your own personal paranormal stories. You can email those to us at pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. You can shoot us some DMs, some PMs, everything else. But yeah, let's load up those listener stories. And if nothing else, when I get back at the beginning of June, we'll do our big 9-year anniversary special then. Because I want to do it right, and I want to do it with you guys. So shoot us your stories. Tell us some of your tales. I got about 4 of them right now in the chamber that people have sent in just apropos of, spooky podcasts. So, but yeah, do that for us, guys. We'd really appreciate you. And then we got a couple of real long episodes coming up. And I know I keep saying that, but Preston typed up an 8-page document that I have to go through and do a little softening on. So we got a big one coming up about the mud flood, and then also working on a really fun one about worms and some other stuff. So yeah, shoot us over your stories, guys. Brace yourselves, a couple long episodes, and then we'll do the 9-year anniversary probably right when I get home in June. But otherwise, I think that's it. So let me raise this lofty glass of a cherry coconut stout and say cheers to the weird shit in the world and those of us that love to talk about it.
And stay spooky and stay on the paranormal highway.
The cast at Pixelated Paranormal would like to thank you for listening to this week's episode. Pixelated Paranormal is here to tell you tales of the fantastical, the strange, the unknown. Tales that will move you a little further down the paranormal highway. If you'd like to share your own listener story, we would love to hear it. Email us at pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. Again, that's pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. We'd really love to hear from you. Again, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange.